New Mexico Crime Files, a deep dive into the archives, shocking and notorious cases, the arrests and what led to them, and what happened to the suspect. Here are your hosts, Dean Staley and Jessica Garate. New Mexico Crime Files is sponsored by Medrano Struck Law Firm.
Welcome back to New Mexico Crime Files. I am Dean Staley, KRQE News evening anchor, along with my talented co-anchor.
I'm Jessica Garate, and again, a pleasure being here today. We know that covering crime in our justice system is important to our viewers, and so we're going to be taking some time today to go over some high-profile cases that you've seen on our air.
Yeah, and these are probably stories that people have talked about when they happen, and maybe even later. Some of these are horrific crimes that we cover that sort of embed themselves in everyone's memory. Some of them are more pedestrian sort of crimes that we deal with day in and day out. So we'll take a look at all sorts of events.
And we're going to start going back to May 2009. Dean, this is the Ty Toribio case where a little boy, a 3-year-old, was found dead in an Albuquerque park. And this one, I just remember that day. I remember getting a text. It was in the newsroom, and a lot of us were getting texts that this little boy had been found dead in this park, and it was just really, truly unbelievable. And I was just like, this can't possibly be. And so we started making some calls, and unfortunately it was true. And it was one that really just rocked our entire city. It is,
and I think because, and this always happens, it involves just an absolute innocent, right? Someone who is absolutely dependent on their parent, absolutely dependent, this small child, dependent on the world around him. And you just can't believe that someone could do anything to harm a little baby like that.
And as police tried to identify the little boy and who had killed him, I just remember him wearing this little shirt that had a truck on it, and that was what was released out to the public, was just an artist rendering of what the little boy looked like, hoping to get some idea of who this little boy was.
Yeah, one of those details that brings it home, because anyone who has children thinks about, I remember my child wearing something like that, or I remember the truck that my child liked, that sort of thing. And it just, just heartbreaking.
So about a week later, after his body had been found, they arrest his mother, Ty Toribio. And 6 months later, she was arraigned on child abuse and murder charges. And that was a full year after his body was found. There were still a ton of questions, and that's where this story comes in. It's from Maria Medina from May of 2010.
Let's take a look.
For 1 week, no one knew his name.
This is senseless.
Some called him the angel of Alvarado Park.
You just couldn't fathom, how could someone do that?
Investigators say after spending the night here at Alvarado Park, Ty Toribio murdered her son, then buried his body underneath the playground equipment. 2 days later, a mother and her kids found his body.
Do you have some emergency?
I'm at a park. It's called Alvarado Park in New Mexico, in Albuquerque. And we're just digging under the playground, and I can't bring myself to unearth the whole thing, but I think I just found a body buried under the playground equipment.
Police say Toribio took her 3-year-old son to Alvarado Park after friends kicked her out the day before because they felt she treated Ty poorly. Investigators say Toribio suffocated Ty, revived him, then suffocated him again. Then police say she used her hands to dig his grave in the park sand. A week later, police arrested his mother.
She did not want him to grow up with no one caring about him the same way that she had grown up, with nobody caring about her. I remember doing that press conference.
Police Chief Ray Schultz says Ty's murder affected the investigators on the case.
Seeing the tears in their eyes, it was a hard case.
And the community.
We saw a pretty strong uptick when it comes to crimes being reported involving children.
At Alvarado Park, there are no longer any signs of Ty's murder, but his death is not easily forgotten.
It doesn't seem like it's been a year already.
His mother sits behind bars, awaiting her October trial. She faces life in prison.
How do you want to see this case closed?
Well, this is a case where there's no winners. It's just a horrible case.
In Albuquerque, Maria Medina, KRQE News 13.
We asked Ty Toribio for an interview months ago. She never answered our request.
So an absolutely heartbreaking story, and I think it's worth talking about some of the absolute crushing details that come out of this. The fact that the mother suffocated this child with her own hands. You just can't imagine someone doing that to this poor little boy. And then, as you know, Jess, and we reported at the time, tried to revive the boy, like, oh, I think I made a mistake. And then went through with it and killed her child.
Just heartbreaking details. And then her reasoning, which she told police, was that she just didn't want this little boy to grow up being unloved and unwanted and not having anyone close to him like she had grown up.
Yeah.
And that's what she had told police would happen.
And she dug the hole with her bare hands too. This wasn't like she brought a shovel to the park and dug. She literally, ended her child's life with her own hands and then dug the hole with her. It's just almost beyond words. It's so horrific. I do want to mention, Jess, when you say that, she was in a desperate place. This is not a case that we want to make apologies for child killers, but clearly she had some internal feeling of desperation. She's alone in the world. She just got kicked out of her home, and I think it's telling. Chief Schultz, the Albuquerque police chief at the time, a hardcore anti-crime, we're going to get the bad guys kind of cop. When he was asked, what should we do with this woman? He didn't say, I think this is worth noting, oh, let's throw the book at her. He had sort of a softer thought of like, well, consider, I think there was a little bit of that humanity in him saying, consider what this woman was going through for some reason, right? Can we sort of get inside her head for a moment? She was kicked out of her home. She had a horrible childhood herself. It doesn't excuse it, but maybe it helps explain how someone could do something so horrific.
And, she's just, as you said, just in the most desperate time of her life. Like she's sleeping in a park with her 3-year-old son wondering, like, how am I going to feed this little boy? What's next for us? And just could not, as you said, like she was going back and forth. I mean, she revived him and then went back and was like, okay, I'm going to have to do this.
So she was conflicted about it. And let's talk, too, about how this ends, though. So the state files a motion, guilty but mentally ill. The psyche eval is ordered, but then the judge denies that order, right? And ultimately, we get a conviction of child abuse resulting in death and second-degree murder. This is back in 2012, and she gets 23 years.
And so she could be up, released in 2029. So that is coming, little ways off. But that's when her earliest release could be. And this trial took a little while to get there. Like we had some back and forth happen in 2009, and she was sentenced in 2012. So.
And that's almost automatic when you have a crime like this, because you think this person wasn't in the right mind. Like it's hard to imagine someone who's rational, who's living a normal life, could do something so horrific. So almost immediately you go into like, as the state said,
the psych evals.
A psych eval, and child abuse resulting in death is what we end up with. Yeah.
So coming up after our break, we'll look into Sheriff Thomas Garza. There's an audio recording of him at a DWI stop that got him in some trouble.
New Mexico Crime Files is sponsored by Medrano Struck Law Firm, New Mexico's trusted personal injury attorneys with nearly 40 years of combined experience, fighting for the justice and compensation you deserve. Call 505-217-2200 or visit MedranoStruckLaw.com today. Let's get back to New Mexico Crime Files.
All right, welcome back. This next crime story that we're going to look into involves a sheriff's deputy, Mora County, pulls over someone who's driving drunk, and then the sheriff pulls up to the scene.
The sheriff saying that he wanted to make sure that his deputies were making sure that these people were drunk when they pulled them over. The deputy made it very clear that this man was drunk, and the sheriff even admitted he thought he was drunk. But then the sheriff wants this driver to be let go free.
Yes, and it's interesting, and I just want to point this out before we watch this story. The deputy standing up against the sheriff, which is a tough thing to do if you're just a deputy, saying, no, this person should go to jail. I'm not going to just let them go. So that was sort of and that's where the conflict in the story comes from.
And they get in a fight. This is from audio from May 20th of 2012. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
Police are investigating whether that sheriff was playing favorites.
The deputy who was ordered to set the DWI suspect free wanted none of it, and the sheriff fired him on the spot. News 13's Nancy Laughlin is live in the Newsplex with the recording of that angry exchange. Nancy?
Well, Dick, the sheriff admits in the police report that even he thought the man his deputies were about to arrest was drunk. But the sheriff wanted to let him go. He insists it was not a favor. It was simply to show his men that he's the boss. Then he fired the deputy.
Let's go. I'm taking this guy for a DWI. Come on.
This is an audio recording of Mora County Sheriff Thomas Garza firing Deputy Lee Allingham. The incident recorded by a fellow deputy who had just helped bust a suspected drunk driver, a suspect the sheriff knew and was about to let walk. According to a state police report, April 7th, Deputy Allingham arrested Patrick Trujillo after he failed a field sobriety test. He took him to the sheriff's department to fill out paperwork. Then the off-duty sheriff showed up. The sheriff told state police he was on his way to church and decided to stop by to make sure his deputies were following procedure. Then someone called the suspect's family and they showed up. The sheriff was about to release Trujillo to them. That's when Deputy Allingham became outraged. The two men scuffled and the sheriff tried to lay down the law.
I can do what I want. No, you can't. Nobody can tell me what to do. Since when? If I want to release him, I will release him. And no, you can't do that. No, you can't. It's a second DWI. Come on. Release him.
Today, state police released their report of their own investigation into the matter. When they asked the sheriff why he was about to release the suspect, he told them he wanted to show his deputies he was the boss. When state police asked the sheriff if he saw any evidence Trujillo had been drinking, he said, yeah, he could smell the odor. Trujillo is the ex-husband of the department dispatcher who was also there during the exchange.
Are you related to the gentleman who was arrested, Mr. Trujillo? Is that your ex-husband?
Yes, he's my ex.
Okay. Do you know if the sheriff knows him or if they're friends at all?
The deputies told state police that Sheriff Garza had ordered them to notify him anytime they came across a suspected drunk driver that he knew, so he could make sure that driver got a ride home. The deputies say they were concerned about that, and that is why they recorded what happened that night. Sheriff Garza refused to talk to us. Back to you.
All right, Nancy, the state police investigation is focused primarily on whether the sheriff assaulted the deputy during their scuffle. Any action against the sheriff for trying to let a DWI suspect go would probably have to come from the state board that oversees law enforcement.
Dean, listen to that audio. This case just stinks. You know that this drunk driver is being let go. You know that this driver is drunk, could cause harm to other people. And it's the sheriff saying, yeah, let him go.
And this happens, I think it's fair to say, not just in New Mexico, in small town places, but all across the country where you have a sheriff in charge, but he's also a member of the community, and he has friends in the community, and he feels accountable to people in the community, including his friends. So in this moment, it's fairly obvious that the sheriff steps in and says, hey, that's one of mine. That's a friend of mine. Let's let him go.
And as noted in there, it was the ex-husband of one of his dispatchers that had been pulled over and let go. And part of it, too, is just him saying, you know, that really bothered me was him saying, you know, I'm just trying to show my men that I'm the boss. I'm the one making all these decisions and trying to, you know, claim it that that's what was happening at this scene.
Yeah, that he was somehow taking the high road as a supervisor, that I'm just going to show that I'm in charge, when really what he was doing seemed to be cutting his friend a break, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and great, and good on that deputy, that the deputy, you know, resisted and said, you know, this is wrong, you can't do this, and that they had this conflict. And thankfully, the conflict didn't escalate from there. Yeah.
And this ended, this is a sheriff that would keep making headlines for some problems that he ran into. So in 2013, state police charged Garza with attempting to tamper with public records. Then by that December, he changed his plea and agreed to step down as sheriff and gave up his law license. He was given a deferred sentence if he did not get in trouble for a year. And then by 2014, his case was dismissed. But he kept running into a lot of trouble. He had two deputies that sued him. Mm-hmm. And then another woman in a completely different case sued him because he, again, let a drunk driver go and crashed into her after he had crashed into this woman and injured her. Mm-hmm. And so she ended up suing the department too. And the deputy that showed up to that crash scene was like, this guy is highly intoxicated, crashed into this woman head on. And the sheriff wanted him to go free.
And I think it's worth noting here in New Mexico, drunk driving is such an important issue. We've been battling it for decades now, not just years, but decades. We've had horrific crashes that claimed, you know, the life of entire families sometimes. I mean, high profile cases like that. So drunk driving in this state is something very special. It's a special public safety issue that we've been trying to address and tackle for years. And then, of course, we can't talk about this story without mentioning the fact that we right now have a high-profile defense attorney admitting that he organized a scheme where they were letting drunk drivers off because they were paying the cops not to show up to hearings so the cases would get dropped. That's just unfathomable. I think that was one of those, I mean, this is a different sort of trying to let a drunk driver go, but it does resonate with the public thinking, wow, how are we ever going to get to the bottom of this if you have sheriffs letting their friends go, and then you have this other organized scheme. I mean, it just seems like when do we finally hold people accountable who are getting in their cars drunk?
I think this is the most frustrating cases to cover because we do have such a problem and with drunk driving in our state. And then you just see this kind of stuff happening and not, we've made so much strides in like trying to get laws changed and trying to hold drunk drivers accountable. And then you've got sheriffs and police officers that are getting paid to drop these cases against people. And it's just really disappointing, really frustrating to have to cover.
Yeah, so the headline is institutionally we've come so far in terms of changing laws, in terms of changing the system, in terms of trying to respond to people driving drunk and injuring and putting other people at risk. But it's the human factor in those systems, right? The weakness of police officers who are willing to take a bribe, a defense attorney who's trying to make money on this, the weakness of a sheriff who wants to look the other way. It's always that human factor that sort of undermines the system that we wish would work better. Yeah.
So coming up after the break, you're going to love this story. This is one where, most people, you find someone breaking into your home, you call the police, you're frightened. Not these neighbors. They took matters into their own hands, and you've got to see this video. We'll be right back.
Pretty unbelievable. All right, welcome back. We have one of these crimes that I would say is sort of a pedestrian crime just in the sense that it happens all the time, right? A fairly common crime, breaking and entering. We have someone who does this repeatedly. This person on this day, this burglar, has some crazy behavior once he gets in the home. And then what's even more amazing about this story is what happens to him after the homeowner calls a neighbor and says, hey, I've got a problem. I see on my security camera someone's in my house.
And what they end up doing to this guy is, you just got to see it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the video.
The security video shows the intruder putting on the homeowner's jacket and then raiding the fridge for a beer. That's when the homeowner shows up and brings backup with him.
Albuquerque police say this is the video of Mark Thompson breaking into a home, then making himself at home. In the security video, you can see Thompson casually walking in yesterday afternoon, putting on a jacket, wandering around, then turning on the TV. At one point, he even grabs a beer from the fridge. The homeowner got an alert that there was movement in his home. He watched Thompson on his phone and called his neighbor. Chandra Vestal lives across the street from that homeowner and didn't hesitate to help.
So I went to our garage, my husband and I, and we got 2 pistols. We met him in the cul-de-sac. He blocked off the entry of the cul-de-sac to make sure if he did have a vehicle, the man that was entering the home, that he wouldn't be able to escape. So as he pulled in, I passed him this .45 and then I got the other Ruger. Micah and I went into the home with 2 of the loaded weapons. Micah announced himself to the perpetrator saying, I have a loaded weapon, get down on your hands and knees. At that time, I came up behind him and we got the individual on his hands and knees to lay down. So we got his arms and his feet duct taped, and then we picked him up, carried him out to the front yard, and waited for the police to show up.
When police showed up, they found Thompson on the ground, his hands and ankles taped.
The police had told us that the home prior that he had broken into, he was wearing the same clothes that he had stolen from that home when he broke into Micah's house.
But Thompson tried to talk his way out of this one.
Truly said, I'm not trying to steal anything, I just want to be friends.
The homeowner and the neighbors say they were confident in their ability to detain Thompson because they both served in the Army. Jeannie Nguyen, KRQE News 13.
So this crime happened in June of 2017, and all I'm going to say is these are the kind of neighbors you want next door. Not only do they show up armed, they seem really responsible with their weapons, and they're leading the charge, and they take this guy down without any problem.
And I am going to make a note that, so the woman you saw in there, Chandra Vestal, she actually years later, coached my daughter in soccer. And this is a woman you do not want to mess with. And her neighbors knew. They're like, their neighbors had been in the Army and were ready to go. Like most people in those situations aren't running towards the guy inside the home. And they were ready to take him down. And just seeing him wrapped in tape, it's fantastic.
And I think every homeowner,
I wish we could see more of this.
Every homeowner takes a little bit of pleasure in seeing this. Like, there's someone who disrespected, went into someone's home, did this, and that's the consequence. Let the police come and get them. Now, let's walk people. That's the positive side of this. It's not all positive. The negative side. So Thompson, in this case, Mark Thompson, gets indicted. The judge orders a competency evaluation. In February of 2018, he pleads guilty. He sentenced to 4 years. So you think, okay, he's going to pay for his crime finally. But that same month, the defense withdraws the plea, and then by January of the next year, 2019, he is deemed incompetent to stand trial, right? So he's, I guess, before the sentencing, so he doesn't have to serve that sentence, and this case gets dismissed. Crazy, right?
How?
Yeah,
we have video, you have everything
and also, he has a history of this. This isn't the first time he's been caught in someone's home, and then 5 days later, after the case is dismissed, he's arrested, entering into a business, and that case gets dismissed as well, and he's responsible for a dozen more of these, which brings us to another problem that we're facing in terms of crime in our community.
Just constantly causing trouble, more than a dozen other times since that case happened.
I don't even know what to say about it, honestly. Like, it's insane. It's nuts.
A repeat burglar is back in custody after allegedly being caught inside yet another person's home. 2 years ago, Mark Thompson was caught by a North Valley homeowner who duct taped him and left him for police. Police say a woman who lives a few miles from that scene near Rio Grande and Mountain arrived at home to find Mr. Thompson standing in her kitchen wearing her jeans and tank top. According to the criminal complaint, the woman yelled at him to leave, but he told her, "This is my house."
The scary thing is that there's so many people with mental health and drug issues, and I think that contributes a lot to the crime that we have.
Thompson was arrested while still wearing the woman's clothing and earrings. He told police he had recently purchased the home after being released from jail. Now neighbors are on edge.
Our neighborhood is very quiet, and it's a very close community. We keep in touch. We have community meetings, and it's awful to hear something like that is happening here in our neighborhood.
People say they are confused and scared why someone would break in and behave so strangely.
You know, it's scary. There's a lot of children and elderly in this community, so it's scary to know that somebody had such easy access to get into somebody's home here, being that we are a secure community.
Corey King, KRQE News 13.
All dismissed because of competency, and again, these are just the frustrating cases. And one of the things that this year at this legislative session that lawmakers are looking at, and how do we improve this and how do we address this, because they just keep coming out of jail and causing more problems, and we just can't get rid of this issue. And so,
and I will say, Jess, people are going to call me that I'm, defending the criminals, right? But I will. Let's take a moment and think about it. This guy was in someone's house. He put on like a hoodie of theirs and got a beer. I mean, he's clearly not acting like a real burglar. He's clearly has a problem where he knows how to get into homes, but once he gets there, and then I think even as they were taking him down, he's asking them, "Can't we be friends?" Like there is clearly a competency issue. So I'm not trying to defend the behavior. I'm not trying to excuse it, but I think there is an explanation for people who are just have real hardcore mental health issues. And we've had these, and these people become massive nuisances, right? So how many homes is this kind of guy going to break into? And they will never lock him up. The same thing, Central near UNM, you've got someone walking down the street swinging a bat at people, and until he really hurts somebody, they'll lock him up and then let him out, and then the community has to deal with this. So it's an issue, as you mentioned, of competency, and it's been going on for decades. And as you said, maybe we're getting closer to saying we need to do something here.
And especially when you look at those families, most families, I mean, it's terrifying. And you're seeing this guy in your house, and even with those issues, you want to see you just feel so violated. You want to see some sort of justice done in your case. And when this kind of stuff happens, and they keep getting out and doing it to more people, it's just this revolving door of crimes in our cities that just aren't getting addressed. And at the basic level, even if it's this and he didn't harm anyone, it's just so frightening for people to see that. And I couldn't imagine seeing someone walking around in my house.
Absolutely. And I don't want to minimize that at all.
Absolutely.
And by the way, just because you're mentally ill doesn't mean you're not going to stab, right? I mean,
right.
Say, well, he's not well. That doesn't mean he's not dangerous. So they were lucky that he wasn't more dangerous in this circumstance, that he didn't have, a butcher knife or something with him, right? And he had those intentions. But clearly that is such a traumatic thing as a homeowner. You want, at least, if he's not going to go to jail, can we keep him locked up in a place where he can get help, and then other people won't suffer this?
And I think that is what hopefully our lawmakers will address, because it doesn't do any justice either just putting him in jail and not getting the help that he needs, so that we can finally get something addressed with him, that he's not doing this anymore. And so hopefully we'll figure out how to balance that.
And mental health professionals will tell you put him back on the street, he's as likely to get hurt as he is to hurt somebody else by other people on the street or by someone else. So hopefully we'll get closer to a solution there.
Well, Dean, that is a wrap for this show. Please join us next week for New Mexico Crime Files.